Something strange happened to me 3 years ago while I was hiking through a forest near my town. I had gone there many times before, and nothing unusual had ever happened. The forest was quiet, peaceful, almost comforting. But that day, something felt different. The forest seemed too quiet. There were no birds, no insects, no wind. I remember stopping for a moment and looking around. It felt like something was watching me from somewhere between the trees. I told myself I was just imagining things. After all, forests can play tricks on your mind. So I kept walking. About 10 minutes later, I heard something behind me. Footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps stepping on dry leaves. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. Just trees. Endless trees. At that point, my heart started beating faster. I knew what footsteps sounded like, and those were definitely footsteps. So I started walking faster. Not running, just faster. Trying to convince myself it was just an animal. Then I heard it again, closer this time. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Leaves being stepped on behind me. I stopped walking, and the footsteps stopped too. That's when I knew something was wrong. Slowly I turned my head, and for a brief second, I saw something move behind one of the trees. It looked tall, much taller than a normal person, and strangely thin. I blinked, and it was gone. At that point, I didn't care what it was anymore. I started running. Branches scratched my arms as I pushed through the trees. My heart was racing. I didn't dare look back, but I could still hear the footsteps behind me, running, following me. Then suddenly, the forest became silent again, completely silent. I slowed down and finally turned around. Nothing. No footsteps, no shadows, no movement. But on the ground behind me, there were footprints. Huge footprints, much bigger than any human foot, and they stopped. Right where I had been standing. I never went back to that forest again. I used to go hiking in a forest about an hour away from my town. It was a place I knew very well. I had walked those trails many times before, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. The paths were simple and easy to follow. You could walk for hours and never really get lost. At least, that's what I always believed. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk before sunset. The weather was perfect. The air was cool and the forest smelled like wet leaves and pine. Everything felt calm, peaceful. But the deeper I walked into the forest, the stranger things started to feel. At first, it was small things. The trail I was following didn't look familiar anymore. I thought maybe I had taken a wrong turn without realizing it. So I kept walking. But the trees around me started to look different. Older, taller. The forest looked darker, even though the sun hadn't fully set yet. I stopped and checked my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual in that area, but it still made me feel uneasy. So I decided to turn around and go back. But when I did, something felt wrong. The path behind me looked completely different. The trail I had just walked on was gone. Where the path should have been, there were only trees and thick bushes. I stood there for a moment trying to understand what I was seeing. Maybe I had stepped off the trail without noticing. So I started walking slowly, trying to find something familiar. A sign, a rock, anything. But everything looked the same, just endless trees. Then I noticed something strange, a narrow path between two large trees. It looked like an old trail that hadn't been used in years. The ground was covered with leaves. The trees above it were twisted and dark. I don't know why, but I felt like that path was watching me. It made no sense, but the longer I stood there, the more uncomfortable I felt. Still, I didn't see any other way out of the forest, so I started walking down that narrow path. The deeper I went, the darker it became. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. Then I heard something. A branch snapping behind me. I turned around quickly. Nothing. Just the empty trail. I kept walking. A few seconds later I heard it again. Another branch snapping. But this time, it sounded closer, like someone was walking behind me, matching my steps. Slow, careful. I stopped walking, and the sound stopped too. I stood there for a moment, barely breathing. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps. Very slow footsteps. Right behind me. But when I turned around, there was no one there. The trail behind me was completely empty. That's when I realized something. The forest around me looked different again. The trees were not the same ones I had seen before, and the narrow path I had been following had completely disappeared. I was standing in the middle of the forest, with no trail, no direction, and no idea how I got there. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Very quiet. So quiet that at first I thought it was the wind. But there was no wind, and the whisper sounded like it was coming from somewhere deep in the trees. It sounded like someone calling my name. I didn't wait to hear it again. I started running. I ran through the trees as fast as I could, branches hitting my arms, leaves crunching under my feet. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. After what felt like forever, I finally saw something through the trees. The main trail, the one I had started on earlier. I ran toward it and didn't stop until I reached the parking area. I got in my car and drove away immediately. I never went back to that forest again. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about that narrow path. And I wonder if it was ever really there, or if something in that forest was trying to lead me somewhere. When I was about 17, my friends and I used to explore abandoned places around our town. One night, we decided to visit an old playground that had been closed for years. It was located behind an empty school building that nobody used anymore. During the day, it already looked creepy, but at night, it looked even worse. We climbed the fence and slowly walked toward the playground. Everything was quiet. The swings moved slightly in the wind, and the metal chains made a soft creaking sound. At first we were laughing and joking around, trying to scare each other. But after a few minutes, something about the place started to feel strange. The air suddenly felt colder, and the entire playground became completely silent. Then one of my friends said something that made us all stop. Did anyone else hear that? We all stood still, listening. Then we heard it, a slow creaking sound behind us. We turned around and noticed that one of the swings was moving, but there was no wind anymore, and no one was sitting on it. The swing kept moving slowly back and forth, back and forth. None of us said anything for a few seconds. Then someone quietly whispered, "That's not normal." That's when we saw it. At the far end of the playground, near the trees, something was standing in the darkness. At first we thought it was just another person, maybe someone else exploring the area like we were. But the figure didn't move. It just stood there, completely still, watching us. The longer we stared at it, the more uncomfortable we felt. The figure looked tall, taller than any of us, and something about the way it stood didn't look natural. Then something happened that I will never forget. The swing behind us suddenly stopped moving. At the exact same moment, the figure near the trees started walking toward us. Slowly, very slowly. None of us waited to see what it wanted. We ran. We ran as fast as we could toward the fence we had climbed earlier. Branches scratched our arms as we pushed through the trees beside the playground. No one looked back. When we finally reached the street and stopped running, we turned around to look. The playground was completely empty. No movement, no figure, nothing. But to this day, none of us can explain what we saw standing near those trees that night, and none of us ever went back to that playground again. A few years ago, I worked the night shift at a small gas station on the edge of town. It was the kind of place where almost nothing ever happened. Most nights were quiet and slow. A few cars would stop for gas, someone might come in for snacks, and then everything would go silent again. The station sat right next to a long empty highway. At night, the road looked endless, just darkness in both directions. My shift usually started at 11 at night and ended at 7 in the morning. Around 3 in the morning was always the quietest time. Sometimes an entire hour would pass without a single car driving by. One night, around 3:15, I noticed a car slowly pull into the parking lot. That wasn't unusual, but something about the way the car moved caught my attention. It rolled slowly toward the gas pumps and then stopped. The headlights stayed on, but the driver never got out. At first I didn't think much of it. Sometimes people stop just to check their phone or rest for a moment, but after several minutes the car still hadn't moved. The driver still hadn't gotten out. I walked closer to the window to get a better look. The windows were too dark to see inside, but I could clearly see the driver's side door. It never opened. Another 5 minutes passed. Still nothing. Finally, I decided to step outside and see if everything was okay. The air outside was cold and the highway was completely silent. I slowly walked toward the car. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I got closer and looked through the window. The driver's seat was empty. There was no one inside the car. The passenger seat was empty too. The car was completely empty, but the engine was still running. That immediately made me uneasy, because I had clearly seen the car pull into the parking lot just minutes earlier. Someone had to be driving it. I walked around the car slowly, checking the back seats. Still no one. Then I looked down at the ground near the car. That's when I noticed the footprints. Wet footprints, leading away from the car. But they weren't heading toward the road. They were going toward the side of the building, toward the dark corner where the security cameras couldn't see. That's when I realized something. Someone had gotten out of that car and was now somewhere behind the building, somewhere near me, watching. I quickly walked back toward the station door and locked it behind me. My heart was racing. I kept staring toward that dark corner of the building, waiting for someone to step out. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Nothing happened. Finally, I picked up the phone to call the police. But just as I reached for it, the car outside suddenly shut off. The engine stopped. The headlights went dark, and the entire parking lot fell into complete darkness. I froze, because there was no one in the car, yet somehow it had turned off. A few seconds later I heard something outside. Footsteps, walking slowly along the side of the building, right outside the window. I slowly turned my head toward the glass, and for a brief second, I saw a tall figure pass by the window. It moved in a strange way, almost like it was limping. I immediately called the police, but by the time they arrived, the car was gone. No driver, no footprints, nothing. Just an empty parking lot. To this day, I still don't know what was outside that building that night, but I know one thing for sure. Something had been standing there, watching me. It was exactly 3 a.m. when everything started. There were 5 of us that night. We'd been sitting near the marina for hours talking about random things, watching the dark ocean stretch endlessly into the distance. The air was warm and humid, and the water was so calm it looked almost like glass under the moonlight. The marina was nearly empty. Only a few boats were tied to the docks, gently moving with the slow rhythm of the water. Someone suggested we take one of the small boats out for a ride. At first, everyone laughed. "Right now?" someone asked. But the idea quickly stopped sounding like a joke. It felt like one of those spontaneous adventures that you only do once, the kind of story you tell later and laugh about. "Just for a little while," one of my friends said. So we untied the boat. The rope slid quietly into the water as we pushed away from the dock. One of us started the engine, and the motor came alive with a deep rumbling sound. Within minutes, we were moving across the open water. The lights from the shore slowly faded behind us. Soon they were nothing more than tiny glowing dots on the horizon. Out there, the ocean felt completely different. Darker. Colder. The water reflected the moon in broken silver waves. For the first 10 minutes, everything felt exciting. We joked around and enjoyed the feeling of being completely alone in the middle of the ocean at night. Then the engine made a strange noise. It wasn't loud, just different. The driver slowed the boat slightly. "Did you hear that?" he asked. The rest of us went quiet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the engine stuttered. The boat jerked forward slightly before the motor shut off completely. Silence. Total silence. The ocean around us was now completely still. The driver tried starting the engine again. Nothing. He tried again. The engine clicked, but refused to start. We were now floating in the middle of dark water with no lights anywhere nearby. That's when one of my friends pointed ahead. "Guy, what is that?" At first it looked like nothing more than a darker shape against the black horizon. But as our eyes adjusted, we realized it was something rising out of the water. An island. None of us remembered seeing any island when we left the marina. But there it was, close, much closer than we expected. The water slowly pushed the boat toward it. Then suddenly, crack! The bottom of the boat scraped hard against something beneath the surface. Rocks. The boat had run into shallow water. We grabbed our phones and turned on the flashlights. The island looked strange. The sand wasn't normal beach sand. It looked darker, rougher, almost like crushed stone. Large black rocks surrounded the shore. We stepped out of the boat carefully. The island was completely silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. Even the waves sounded distant. One of my friends walked farther up the beach. "Guys, come look at this." At first I thought they were just pieces of driftwood, but when we got closer, we realized what they really were. Boat parts, broken wood, bent metal, ropes, life jackets, pieces of engines, and there were a lot of them. Too many. It looked like dozens of boats had crashed here. Some of the pieces looked extremely old. Others looked almost new, like they had washed up recently. Then we saw something further up the island. A tall structure made of rusted metal bars. At first it looked like some kind of tower, but when we got closer we realized what it actually was. A massive cage. Inside it were hundreds of small objects hanging from thin wires. They moved slowly, clinking softly together. Clink, clink, clink. We pointed our flashlights closer. That's when we realized what they were. Boat keys. Hundreds of them, different shapes, different brands. Old keys, new keys, all hanging together. No one spoke. Then one of my friends said something that made my stomach drop. "Wait, where are our keys?" We all looked at the boat. The ignition was empty. Slowly we turned our lights back toward the cage. There they were, our keys, hanging with the others, swinging slowly, right below the cage in the sand. There were footprints, fresh ones, leading away from the beach, going deeper into the island, as if someone had just walked there, watching us the entire time. Then suddenly we heard something behind us. A splash. Slow. Heavy. Like something large had just moved beneath the surface near the boat. We all turned. The ocean looked calm again. But the boat was slowly drifting away from the shore. as if something underneath it was pulling it back into the dark water. And from somewhere deeper inside the island, we heard a whisper. Very quiet. Very close. It said only one word. More